Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on the Pagan Perspective, and this month we are doing all topics related to deity, and this week we are talking about true and false gods, in a sense. This week's topic comes from Shannon Wolf, who asked, how do we know if the gods we are worshipping are true? The Celtic and Norse goddesses and gods were mentioned in some records taken largely from Christian scholars. How accurate the portrayals are, we have no way of knowing. I feel safer worshipping deities that are newer or even pop culture or video game ones. Is this form of practice okay? My answer takes 4 basic parts. Number 1, yes, it's okay, in my opinion. My view of deity is symbolic. So I think that as ideas and beliefs change with the times, so do the deities we worship and feel an affinity for. That is not to say that the so-called old gods are no longer relevant at all. They certainly are to many people, though sometimes also in ways that have been updated. But yes, I think that if people feel a bigger connection to new forms, or even with connecting older forms to newer forms, to make that connection more solid for them, such as connecting Hermes with the Doctor, which is something that one of my viewers, Heather, brought up to me a few years ago, and I think that that is amazing, then I personally view that as valid. I also encourage people who don't feel a strong connection to deity at all to focus on the things that they do believe in, whether it be abstract concepts of energies like love, friendship, wisdom, or what have you, or other energies or entities that are not deities, such as your ancestors, your animal spirits, different guides, things like that. And I don't think that choosing to worship new deities or pop culture or video game deities is all that different from that. Now, if you're worshiping a deity who is portrayed in a comic book or a video game, for example, then I think it would certainly behoove you to research that deity and their origins in history and religion, and not simply worship the character representation only, because while those things are based on the original deities, they do take a lot of liberties. So researching and being familiar with their historical religious origins can really only add to your knowledge and understanding of them, and therefore your relationship with them. Part 2, it is true that history was written by the victors. So we have no way of knowing exactly how much truth is in some of those old records, how much they did away with to suit their own needs, or how much was never recorded or passed down at all. We just don't know, and that's okay. As my minister's partner illustrated in his sermon this past Sunday at my Unitarian Universalist church, when he told a story about his great-great-grandmother's cookie recipe, and how her cookies were nothing like the cookies that he makes now, even though they came from the same original recipe. Ideas change with time. Things can start out one way and be changed a little bit at a time over generations, until eventually they no longer really resemble their ancestors, but they still share a common lineage. It's okay to know that there are holes in what we know, and still connect with past ideas in the present, as neo-paganism does, or for some people, attempt to recreate old forms even knowing that we don't know every detail, or know if it's 100% accurate, as Reconstructionism attempts to do. I'm not a Reconstructionist personally, so I'm much more interested in how old forms and ideas can resonate with us today, and in what ways they cannot. I feel the same way about theater. Euripides and Aristophanes and even Shakespeare are fun to do with a historical flair, but they're equally great when done in a contemporary style, because they are classics and we continue to perform them because we continue to connect with them. What we think of as Shakespearean garb is really just what actors wore at the time. So when we do Shakespeare in whatever we wear at the current time, we are being true to its form. And as Eric, our previous Wednesday host, said once, and I loved it and I say it all the time, if the Druids had butane Bic lighters, they would have used them. Part 3 is kind of a devil's advocate, let's think about these things, having an internal argument with myself discussion. Why does it feel safer to worship newer deities than it does to worship older deities that we do have historical documentation on? What is it about that that feels more real or valid to you, and what is it that is lacking in the relationship with the older deities? Or let's look at it this way too. How do you know that a newer deity is real? Or a pop culture deity or a video game deity? How are they any more real? And I'm going to stop doing this, but just imagine that every time I talk about what's real. How do you know that they are real to you? Think about your personal answer to that question. Whatever the answer is, if that same thing happened to you, the connection being made the same way, whatever it is, but with an older deity, would that feel real? Why? What does it take for a deity to feel real to us, worthy of worship, feeling some kind of connection? Whose dreams do they have to enter to get a devotee around here? Why trust a new one over an older one? Why trust an older one over a newer one? Everyone's answer will differ for them personally. Just think about those. And number 4, the fourth part. In this case, since the questioner talked about accuracy, I'm guessing one thing might be that if we're worried about how accurate portrayals are of the old gods, then the reason newer ones are preferred is because they were created recently or otherwise came about recently. So we have a full and accurate look at who they are, what they are. Especially in the case of pop culture or video game deity. We have the source material. But obviously, some people will argue that a human just created them. So why are they any better than ancient deities who have made themselves known to humans since humans began to exist? Songs, poetry, theater, art, we have all these ways of knowing that these deities have been being worshipped by humans for thousands upon thousands of years. Doesn't that afford them some credit? Then there's the added level of whether you believe in deity as literal beings who really lived and even still live and actually physically exist, in which case there may be newer ones revealing themselves in some way, but probably pop culture and video game deities would not be considered real in that view. Anyone who holds that view should feel free to weigh in on this, or whether you view deity as symbolic. In which case, old or new, they're all just symbols and ideas and thought forms and concepts anyway. So does it really matter how old they are or where they came from? What are the deciding factors for us? What makes a deity real to us? These are all just things to think about. I may expand on my personal attempts to answer these questions in a video on my personal channel or in a blog post. But that's my take on the question as posed, and with that, I leave you. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.